Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It had been almost 8 years since Elise and Marcus had fallen in love. Back then, their romance had been explosive, full of late-night drives, whispered dreams under tangled sheets, and endless laughter that felt like it could carry them through anything. But life, as it always does, reshaped them. Jobs, obligations, long commutes, and 2 children later, their relationship had shifted. Still strong, still present, but quieter, safer. Sometimes too safe. Elise missed the fire, the intensity. The sense that when Marcus looked at her, he really saw her not just the mother of his children, not just his partner in grocery runs and mortgage payments, but the woman he had once chased with wild devotion. They were still in love. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that their love had started to feel like a routine. Instead of a choice. Until the cabin trip. It was a surprise weekend getaway, their first in nearly 5 years without the kids. Marcus had planned it himself. Elise hadn't expected much. Maybe a bit of hiking, a few awkward conversations, and some wine by the fireplace. But the moment she stepped inside the cabin, something shifted. There was no cell reception. No Wi-Fi, just them. For the first time in years, they looked at each other and didn't have anywhere else to be. That night, they sat by the fire drinking old red wine from paper cups. Elise wore an oversized sweater and bare legs tucked under her. Marcus looked at her like it was the first time, like he had been starving without realizing it. He reached across the couch, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and said softly, "I miss touching you without a reason." Her breath hitched. "I miss being touched like I matter," she whispered. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. Years of love, frustration, loneliness, and tenderness folded into one quiet moment. Marcus leaned in. Slowly, deliberately. When he kissed her, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't out of obligation. It was full and deep and full of hunger that neither of them had spoken aloud for years. He pulled her closer, hands strong, certain. She gasped, caught off guard by how badly she had needed this, not just the physicality. The presence. His size, his strength, his intensity, it surrounded her. Stole her breath, not in fear, but in awe. They didn't rush. They didn't speak. It was the kind of lovemaking that felt like rebuilding something that had almost been lost piece by piece, breath by breath. He held her like a man who had never stopped wanting her. And she let go like a woman who finally remembered what it felt like to be truly seen. Later, tangled in blankets on the rug by the fire, Elise rested her head on Marcus's chest. His heart beat steady beneath her ear. "I thought we lost this," she murmured. He kissed the top of her head. "We didn't lose it, we just forgot to keep looking for it." They stayed like that for hours. Bodies close, breaths sensed, hands tracing familiar maps. That weekend didn't fix everything. Life was still waiting when they returned. School runs, bills, late meetings. But something had shifted. They started leaving notes again. Kissing like it mattered. Started choosing each other, even when it wasn't easy. Elise often thought back to that moment on the cabin floor. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, messy, powerful, honest. She had once worried their love would fade under the weight of life. But that night, wrapped in the arms of the man who had always been hers, she realized love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just needs to be invited back in. The morning after the cabin night, Elise woke before Marcus. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting a soft orange hue across the wooden floor. Their clothes were still scattered across the room, a trail of rediscovery. She lay there watching him sleep, breathing in the stillness. It felt sacred, like the quiet after a storm, when the sky breaks open and light floods in. She reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. He stirred and opened his eyes, a sleepy smile forming. "Morning?" he murmured, voice rough and warm. "Hey," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither of them moved right away. Their legs were tangled, skin still warm from the night before. There was no awkwardness, no rush to get dressed or make coffee. Just presence. That rare, delicate gift of being exactly where they wanted to be. Later, over breakfast, Elise sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, her hands curled around a mug of tea. Marcus came out with his own and sat beside her, their thighs just barely touching. The morning mist still clung to the trees, and the silence stretched comfortably. I didn't know how far we drifted, he said finally. Until I saw you last night, really saw you. Elise looked down, emotions stirring. I thought you did see me, she said. I saw parts of you, he admitted. The tired you. The mother. The woman who kept things running when I dropped. The ball, but I stopped seeing the whole woman. The one I fell in love with. And I let myself disappear, she added softly. Into all the roles. I forgot how to ask for more. He reached for her hand and laced their fingers together. Let's not forget again. They spent that day walking through the woods near the cabin, fingers brushing, sometimes holding, sometimes not. They didn't talk constantly, and that was the beauty of it. They were no longer afraid of the silence. It wasn't emptiness. It was peace. Later, Elise turned to him while they sat on a large flat rock beside a creek. What if we planned? These weekends twice a year? Just us. No phones, no pressure. Marcus smiled. I was thinking the same thing. By the time they returned home, something in them had changed. Subtle, not loud or dramatic. Just stronger. They touched more, small, lingering touches during dinner prep. Hands on backs as they passed each other in the hallway. The kids noticed, too. Are you and Dad on a date again? Their daughter asked one night. Elise laughed. Kind of, she said. But it's a long one. One evening weeks later, after the kids were asleep and the house was still, Marcus found Elise in the bathroom brushing her hair. He leaned against the doorway. Come here. She turned confused. Why? Because I haven't kissed you. I mean it in 3 days, and that's too long. She smiled, heart stuttering just a little, and stepped into his arms. They made love again that night. Slow and warm and easy, a continuation of what had started at the cabin, but deeper. Now, rooted in something they had promised to protect, and afterward, when Elise lay with her head on Marcus's chest, she thought of the words he'd said in the woods. Let's not forget again, because love wasn't something that stayed burning without. Fuel. It needed intention, time, touch, words. And now, they gave all of it freely. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that made all the difference. It was raining the evening Marcus came home late. Not from work, but from a surprise detour. Elise had just finished putting the kids to bed when she heard the door open. The air smelled like wet pavement and something familiar. The cologne Marcus wore when they first met. She turned the corner and saw him standing there, soaked, holding a small box. She raised an eyebrow. You okay? He nodded. I just needed to do something spontaneous. Elise smirked. Spontaneity usually doesn't involve cardboard. Open it? He said. Inside was a simple, leather-bound journal. On the first page, in Marcus's handwriting, it read, For the words we don't say, and the ones we never want to forget. She looked up, eyes glossy. I want to keep writing to you, he said, like we used to when everything was new. You remember those notes we left on the bathroom mirror? I want to bring that back. Elise touched the page. This is beautiful. He stepped closer. So are you. That night, they began a new tradition. One would write something in the journal each week, a memory, a thought, a confession, a thank you, and leave it on the other's nightstand. The notes became their quiet bridge in the chaos of parenting and careers. Some were funny, some were sad. Others read like poetry, reminders that love is not just felt, but chosen again and again. Their second cabin trip arrived with little fanfare, but it was everything they needed. This time, It wasn't about rediscovery, it was about celebration. Marcus brought a camera. Elise brought the old flannel sweater he used to love her in. Spent the first night by the fire again, reading old pages from the journal, laughing at how dramatically they had written about arguments over grocery lists and laundry. But between the lines, there was so much care. That night, they made love again. Not like strangers chasing something lost, but like partners who had built something stronger than passion alone. It was slow, meaningful. He touched her like he had all the time in the world. She kissed him like she finally believed she was still beautiful. There was no rush, no doubt, just skin and breath and hearts open and quiet understanding. Later, lying in his arms, Elise whispered, "Do you think we're different now?" Marcus smiled against her hair. "No," he said. "I think we're more now. Life didn't magically get easier. There were still hard days. The kids still fought over whose turn it was to wash dishes. Work still drained them. And there were nights when one of them went to bed frustrated. But now, they had something stronger to fall back on. A journal that continued to fill. A bond that had been reforged. A love that wasn't just remembered. It was lived. One day, years from now, Elise imagined reading those pages again. She imagined their future selves holding hands on a porch, gray-haired with soft smiles, knowing they had weathered the storms and still reached for each other. Because in the end, love wasn't just about the first spark. It was about every quiet decision to stay, to see each other fully, and to never, ever stop choosing one another. Marcus had started waking up a few minutes earlier each morning. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to see her before the rest of the world demanded them both. Some mornings, he'd simply make coffee and sit at the edge of the bed while Elise pretended to sleep, even though she always felt his presence the second he entered the room. There was something sacred about those quiet moments. No kids yelling, no emails buzzing, just the two of them suspended in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. He had started brushing her hair. Some nights while she sat in front of the vanity. It was an old-fashioned habit, something Elise's grandmother used to mention in passing when talking about her own long-lost love. The first time Marcus did it, she almost cried. Not because it was romantic, but because it was intentional. It told her, "I see you. I choose you. I want to care for you." She, in turn, had started noticing his pauses. The way he sometimes stood quietly at the sink after dinner, staring out the window. How he rubbed the back of his neck when something at work had gone wrong but didn't want to burden her. How he sometimes held her a little tighter after phone calls with his aging parents. She had learned to touch his shoulder in those moments. No words. Just presence. One Thursday evening, Elise came home from work and found the kids at a neighbor's house, an arrangement Marcus had made behind the scenes. He had set the dining table with candles and dinner was kept warm on the stove. Her favorite record played faintly in the background. "You didn't have to do this," she said, setting down her bag, breath catching slightly. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." They ate slowly, the way they used to when time didn't feel like an enemy. And after dinner, they danced barefoot in the kitchen, just swaying, holding each other, the world spinning around them like background noise. The song ended, but they didn't stop. Later that night, under soft covers in a dim room, they made love again. Not urgently, not because of some milestone, but because being together like that still felt like coming home. Elise traced her fingers along the planes of Marcus's chest like she was memorizing a familiar place with new appreciation. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, every movement deliberate, as if each kiss was a promise. Neither of them spoke much. Their bodies did the talking, not in grand cinematic ways, but in quiet, reverent ones. Like two people who had rebuilt their connection from the ground up and were now living inside the walls they had mended, brick by brick, afterward. Lying together in the dark, Marcus said, "You feel different lately, lighter. I feel like I'm finally breathing again," she said. They stayed there in the dark for a long time, hearts steady and close. She thought about how fragile love could be, how easily it frayed at the edges when no one was looking. But she also thought about how strong it became when nurtured, when protected, when spoken to. Weeks later, Marcus got a call from his brother inviting him to a guy's weekend, something he hadn't done in years. Elise packed his bag before he even asked, tucking a note into the side pocket that said, "Go be with them." "Come home to me." He read it at the airport and smiled. While he was gone, she read old journal entries they'd written to each other and added a new one. "It's not just your arms that make me feel safe. It's your words, your effort, your eyes that haven't stopped choosing me, even when they were tired. I don't need perfect. I just need this. Us. Still choosing." And when Marcus returned that Sunday night, suitcase in hand, Elise was waiting. At the door, she didn't speak. She just kissed him, long and slow, and led him upstairs. They didn't need a fireplace or a weekend away to find each other now. They carried the spark with them, in the everyday, in shared coffee, in folded laundry, in 4 kisses when one of them couldn't sleep. That's how love had changed. Not less exciting. Just deeper. Quieter. More enduring. Because this, the decision to love again and again, in small and ordinary ways, had become their greatest intimacy of all. Spring arrived slowly that year. The world thawed in pieces. Crocuses pushed through the frost. Birds returned with quiet urgency, and Elise found herself opening the windows a little more each day, just to let the soft wind in. It had been nearly 2 years since their first trip back to the cabin. 2 years since the tension, the silence, the nearly missed moment of reconnection. Now, their home was not perfect. No house with children, careers, and time pressures ever was, but it was peaceful. Worn in like a favorite sweater, soft in the places it used to be stiff. One Saturday, Marcus suggested they go back. "The cabin?" Elise asked. Surprised. He nodded. "I think we've earned it. Not to fix anything, just to celebrate what we've built." The moment they arrived, she knew it was the right choice. The scent of pine, the gravel crunching under their tires, the creak of the old wood floors, everything reminded her of the night they had chosen each other again. Not because they had to, but because they truly wanted to. This time, there was no awkwardness. No nerves. Just shared bags, shared laughter, shared space. They cooked dinner together, Elise in one of his old flannel shirts, Marcus barefoot and relaxed. They talked about the kids, but not too much. About life, but not in lists. They just existed. Together, comfortably, like 2 people who had outlived the storm and were now learning to live in the light. After dinner, they went for a walk under the stars. The sky was clear, almost painfully clear, and the cool air made Elise shiver as they wandered down a familiar trail. Marcus stopped suddenly. He turned to her and said, "You remember what I told you last time we were here?" She smiled, teasing. "Which part?" "That I saw you again, really saw you." She nodded. He took both her hands and kissed her knuckles gently. "I still see you, and I hope I never stop." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of love that had weathered so much. Back at the cabin, they lit a fire again. Not for heat, it was warm enough now, but for tradition. They sat in front of it, legs stretched out, a shared glass of wine between them. Music played faintly in the background, an old song from their early days. He touched her cheek and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her heart thud harder, even now after all this time. She leaned into the touch, and in that quiet room, surrounded by memories and flickering firelight, they made love again. Not like people trying to remember something, but like people who had finally arrived at something true. It was slow, reverent. Every movement a conversation. Every kiss an affirmation. He took his time, not just with her body, but with her heart. With the stories her skin had told over the years. The stretch marks, the tiny scar above her hip, the soft curve of her waist. She let herself be fully seen, not because she felt perfect, but because she felt safe. He kissed her like a promise kept. She responded like a heart, reawakened. Their breathing was a shared rhythm. The space between them, once fractured, was now a thread of silk, stretched but never broken. They moved as one, not in urgency, but in understanding. After they lay together, tangled in warmth and candlelight, no words were needed. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, familiar home. He kissed the top of her head and whispered, "This is still my favorite place." She smiled into his skin. Mine too. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, love rested. Not in the fire, not in the wine, not in the perfect moment, but in the choice they had made and kept making every single day. To see each other to stay to begin again, even now. And that was the most passionate thing of all.